Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Memphian Tigers podcast with Greg Gaston, that's me, along with Parth Upadhyaya, the Tigers basketball beat writer, and Tim Buckley, the Daily Memphian deputy sports editor and senior writer. Once again, we are in 4 different locations just to make sure that you understand where the audio is coming from. The Tigers with 2 victories since we last spoke to you last week. They knocked off Temple in Philadelphia 84-77 in a game in which they once led by 23, win by 7. And then on Super Bowl Sunday at home here in Memphis, knock off Tulane and get some revenge on the Green Wave, winning 90-78. Again, 25-point lead in that one. They still end up winning by double digits by 12. So 18-6 now, 7-4 in American Conference play. And gentlemen, they get ready for the toughest stretch of the season, at least in conference, with the 4 games coming up. So far, it seems like that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Wichita State game wasn't the most encouraging in its totality, right? They were down by 14 points, had to rally back to win. But I think just getting on the left side of that column, the win-loss column, getting the W column there, propelled them to do what they did against Temple, and they've gotten better since, right? Like even Temple wasn't perfect. You know, they were up by 23 points in the first half and ended up winning by only 7. And we're seeing them, I guess, not play a full 40 minutes yet, but kind of get closer and closer to that, which is what we saw against Tulane, where they played, what would you say, about 30 minutes of a full effort there? So definitely getting warmer, and it definitely seems like that 7 minutes against Wichita State propelled them to do what they're doing now.
Tim, it's encouraging.
Oh, the whole getting warmer thing is always beautiful. Getting warmer. Look, I wouldn't read too much into the Temple one because that was a team they should have handily beaten anyway, and they made it way tougher on themselves than they should in the second half. But there were stretches where they look especially in that first half, where they look like, again, back to looking like an NCAA tournament quality team against Tulane, which is a team that presents problems with the zone defense that it plays, and They figured out a way against them, and it's a team that obviously has given them trouble in the past with the 2 regular season losses last season, even though it's a completely different Memphis team, and the loss earlier this season as well. So yes, they looked the part in the first half against Tulane. Penny Hardaway was very upset with the 49 points allowed in the second half against Tulane, but they only gave up 29. So if that first half team against Tulane is the one that takes the show on the road, they look like they're in good shape heading into this 4-game stretch. If it's the team that, the defense they had in the second half against Tulane, or the team in totality in the second half against Temple, they could be in for a world of hurt.
And that's pretty much what Ron Hunter said after the game to the media, including Parth, that here we are, this Memphis team in that first half looks like the best team in the conference. And if they play that way, they are the best team in the conference. And then there's the second half where they give up a ton of points to Tulane. Parth, do you have an idea, a thought on why you think this happens, that they are so engaged in a game, whether it be first half or second half, and then the flip half, they're not, or they don't seem to be?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Obviously, at times, especially during that 4-game losing streak, there was a lot of dysfunction, behind the scenes. And that kind of led to selfishness, especially when they would think they were in control, right? Players would assume, okay, the game's over, let me pad my stats. Now it seems like they're turning away from that a little bit, but Greg, to your point, they still haven't got to the point where they're putting together even 35 minutes of high-level basketball, let alone 40. The one against Tulane's interesting, right? Because it was their pressure defense in the first half that, held the Green Wave to 29 points and got them out to that, 17-point halftime lead. It's hard to do that. Is that fair to say? It's hard to do that for a full 40 minutes. So they kind of let off the gas there. And I think that's when you saw Tulane starting to hit those threes and, really getting into their offense versus scrambling all over the place like they were in the first half. So that's what I attribute that to. But, still allowing 49 points, allowing Tulane to shoot, over 50% in that second half, that's inexcusable. And it's not going to work against some of these better teams that are coming up in conference play.
If I was Penny Hardaway, I would assign an assistant coach, the ops guy, maybe one of your student managers, take a road trip to Louisville, hit up Churchill Downs and find 12 pairs of blinders for them there, just like thoroughbreds. Because this team loses its focus so much. It's just they can't hold their attention for 40 minutes and they get up by, well into the double digits, and it's just their attention factor just completely wanders, and I don't know if they're just assuming that they've taken care of business or if they let the little petty stuff get to them or whatever. But man, when they look good, they look really good, and when they look bad, they look terrible, and there's zero focus during those stretches.
Well, they can't say it's an excuse of, well, we weren't really ready to play this team because we think they're inferior to us. I mean, Quinterly talked about that after the Wichita State game, that he basically said desperation time. We knew that our season was on the line and we came together and we won that game. So we know from here on out how pivotal these games are. So I can't imagine they're losing focus because they're taking the team lightly or taking the team for granted. So what is going on X's and O's wise? I don't see anything different that Penny did in the first half that he did in the second half. So it's not that. And then going back to the point you just made, Parth, and you wrote about at the Daily Memphian, the team coming together off the court. We have heard that off the court, they've been in sync more off the court than they have at times on the court. But you wrote about that. So where do you think they are as far as being in sync on the court from what they have done off the court? Because the selfishness, as Tim just brought up, was certainly a theme throughout at least the middle portion of this season.
For sure. And I think, I asked Penny, because we saw a more together, more cohesive team on offense, even against Temple, blowing that 23-point lead and only winning by 7 and getting it to within 3, which Temple did against Memphis, was not ideal, was not good. But if you're looking at kind of a glass half full perspective, you're looking at the positives from that game. They had 17 assists. They've only had 17 or more assists, I think, 5 times this season. That's crazy to say, but it's true. So you go from that to 21 assists, tying their second most in this season in a game on 29 made field goals. That's their highest percentage, right, in terms of assists to field goal to shot makes. So I asked Penny, he had mentioned kind of selfishness and bickering in huddles and just guys not getting along during that losing streak. I said, has something changed? Have guys come together? What's happening off the court that's leading us to what we're seeing on the court? And he said he basically compiled a lowlights package, if you will, the opposite of highlights, kind of the worst of the worst that the team had looked throughout that losing streak, throughout that slump, and sat everybody down together and played it and said, hey, this is what we are now. And this is where we are in terms of tournament projections and, being on the bubble and being close to not getting in. And the way Penny described it was kind of a wake-up call for the guys to say, hey, we only have 7 games left, only have, I guess it'd be 8 games at that point. We have to come together. We have to put our personal goals or aspirations aside and really do whatever's best to get this thing on the right track and get into the NCAA tournament. So that's what I gathered from Penny. That's what I gathered from speaking to Javon Quinterly, after the Tulane win. Just the fact that, it seems like most of them have voluntarily put their egos aside and even made efforts to get closer off the court, like hanging out. I think they watched the Super Bowl together the other night somewhere. Just little things like that that are kind of manifesting themselves on the basketball court.
I guess the good thing, Tim, is that in these 2 wins, Temple and against Tulane, even though the lead shrunk, you were never really worried, at least I wasn't, where I have been in the past, that they were going to lose the lead and lose the game. So in that sense, they are more cohesive. There is the concern why they allow teams back in games, why they can't step on the accelerator a little bit more. I don't have an answer because, again, I didn't see anything from an X's and O's standpoint that he did anything differently in that game. Maybe it is what it is. They took a little bit of their foot off the gas, but their offense seems to be back the last couple of games. Defensively, there's always been that issue in giving up offensive rebounds and second chance points and not defending the perimeter as strong as they should. But that's just the makeup of this team.
Yeah, the second half against Tulane, I never felt as if they were in jeopardy, even as Tulane cut into the lead. Telling you what, if that Temple game had gone 5 more minutes, they might not have left Philadelphia with the win.
And that would have been horrible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, as far as the stuff Parth was talking about, the off-the-court stuff, that's the stuff he should be doing from the get-go. Like, they're now to the point of doing the bare minimum. Like, teams that are truly teams, they do all that stuff regular. And they're just now in almost mid-February talking about doing it. And that's the risk you take when you roll the dice and you rely on the portal to put together 90+% of your team.
Yeah, but they did have the extra practices when they went down to the Bahamas. So there was some bonding, Parth, when they were there. Again, I don't want to dwell too much on what happened. And
Sure.
I'm in total agreement with what Tim just said. But they did have extra time to be able to bond before the season even tipped.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense, is all.
I'm with Tim. The teams that are, I guess, in best position to make these March runs, either A, have been together for years, like they have returnees who are leaders, juniors and seniors or whatever, or they've been doing these things from the get-go, from the summer, hanging out, just the basic stuff, right? Getting dinners together, watching football games together, watching, whatever, film together. Like, teams have been doing that since August, really, if you think about it. And this team is just now doing that. Greg, you're right. Like, they had the DR trip, they had the time in the Bahamas. Of course, that was in the regular season, but they had a little bit of downtime here and there, and, we're in Atlantis and all that kind of good stuff. But I think it's just the moving pieces that we've seen even after the season started, whether it's Jordan Brown leaving the team and kind of the drama that went on there. Then you're adding Naquan Tomlin, right? And then Caleb Mills goes down and you got to fill those holes. Now, all of a sudden, Jordan Brown is back on the team. So you've got all these parts shifting, and you just don't see that in college basketball. There's 31 regular season games, so there's not time to adjust. Whereas in the, in the NBA, the guys are professionals. It's a job. They're mature, whatever it may be. And you got 82 games. So if you make a trade, I don't know, on game 39, guess what? You've got, 43 more games to get things right. And you just don't have that in college basketball. So I think that's played a part. And just kind of the role allocation, for lack of better terms, figuring out who goes where, what pieces fit where. And, that part is on Penny largely in terms of the rotations and getting that down. So they're just now getting all this stuff together, like Tim said, whereas most teams have had it together for months.
I think your point's great. I think it's an absolutely perfect point. The drama that this team has gone through since the summer, and thank you for the correction. Dominican Republic was where they had the trip in August, was it? And then they started out with the Bahamas event. So I'm getting my Caribbean areas of beautiful land mixed up here. But you were at both of them, right?
I was at both of them.
Yeah. So we're all jealous.
In there. Yeah.
We're all jealous, buddy. Living the high life in the Caribbean. All right. Well, you just talked about the team makeup. Now we have Penny talking about limiting his rotation. It was interesting. He talked about that after the game, I think on Sunday, or at the coaches show on Monday, maybe both times. And yet you look back and you go, well, he played a bunch of guys still. And remember, Jalen Young was hurt. Ashton didn't. Was that a coach's decision? Was that not playing his son, or was he hurt? Or under the weather?
Which game against
Ashton? In the game against Tulane, he didn't play.
Yeah, I think that was a coach's decision, which I was surprised by as well, because, you figured at the very least, if you're dipping into that, 9, 10, 11 man range there, Ashton Hardaway is going to play, right? First time I think we've seen him not play in weeks, if not months. So that was,
and don't forget Jonathan Pierre's minutes had to come from somewhere.
Correct. Right. But I thought even at the end of the game, when he brought in Noah Stansbury, Sharon Font to kind of mop it up, he would bring in his son. That's why I thought maybe he was ill. I wasn't there. I was at Mardi Gras, but
nobody asked him about that. I guess we all failed on that part as reporters. Not one person asked Penny about that, and I remember seeing that in the game and thinking something was interesting about that. So. But
Jalen Young was out, so Jalen Young's going to be part of the rotation. So it will be interesting what he does in restricting the rotation, Tim, and maybe what he thinks is limiting the rotation is not what we think. Maybe his is 9, and ours, in our minds, it's like 7, 8. I don't know.
I don't either. I mean, he did cut back from some of the helter-skelterness that was going on. I think it'll be interesting to see how he rotates the bigs going forward. I wrote about that a little bit after Sunday's game. I mean, Malcolm Dandridge's minutes were limited. He picked up 2 quick fouls, hit the bench, and then in the second half comes out, scores a few points, does a couple things, 2 quick fouls again, and sits with 4. And then, Jordan Brown comes in, and they got some decent minutes out of him. They took advantage of a size mismatch, and they went to him a few different times, pounded it inside, and it was effective. It was, I think flashes of what they expected out of Jordan Brown, but now that he stepped up and did that. How do they work Malcolm back in? Penny Hardaway indicated, Malcolm's willingness to come off the bench, especially with Nicholas Jourdain going back to Temple where he played last season, and now you got a good thing going, so you're not going to mess up your starting lineup. But he made a reference to, Malcolm knowing that he'll come in with 3 minutes anyway, so it's almost like a starting lineup change for show. Is it effective or not? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It doesn't do you any good if you pick up the 2 quick fouls. But it's not like Malcolm Dandridge is out of the rotation or anything like that. It's just a matter of how do you juggle those guys. I mean, there were stretches on Sunday when he had 3 of the bigs all playing together with Tomlin and Jourdain and Brown all on the floor. So that'll kind of be interesting to watch down the stretch here.
Parth, you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, no, I was going to say it's interesting because, like Tim mentioned, Malcolm was limited with 7 minutes that game. So he played 8 guys, I believe, 10 or more minutes, which is kind of what, fans and media and everybody's kind of been shouting from the rooftops. People thought that would be best, trimming the rotation to 7 or 8 players and playing them the maximum minutes. But, Malcolm's not always going to have 4 fouls, right? So that's your 9th guy. And then Jalen Young's going to be healthy. You would assume, next game
right.
when they go to Dallas, when they go to North Texas. So all of a sudden that's 10 guys. And, when Penny's had these options in the past, it's been tough for him to narrow things down and choose, who should be on the floor and who shouldn't. Obviously, Jalen Young's injury, makes that easier. Malcolm Dandridge with 4 fouls makes that easier. What's going to happen when all 10 of those guys are both healthy and not in foul trouble? I think that's going to be interesting.
Double digits in basketball is usually a good thing. When it's your rotation, not so much a good thing.
Right. I will bet you dollars to donuts here that there's no way you're going to see a box score in the coming games where there's 8 guys listed for Memphis playing in the game. There will be 10 or 11 guys. I guarantee you. Now, one may play 4 minutes, one may play 5 minutes. There is no way it's going to be 8 guys or 7 guys. There's no way that's happening.
It was pretty much 8 against Tulane, though. It was pretty much 8 against Tulane.
No, I mean, because what you just said. Malco had foul trouble, right? But he did play. Young was out with an injury. Pierre now looks like he's a rotation guy. I'm still curious to see what happened with Ashton. I mean, if you think he's not playing the rest of the year, I mean, unless he just told his son, yeah, I'm going to sit you down and everything will be fine. Who knows what happens with that association, because he's not only it's a player-coach relationship, but it's a father-son relationship. But I'll be surprised. I really will if I see 7 or 8 names and that is it.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that's the tricky part. It's like, hey, like what we're seeing these past 2 games, is it, for lack of better terms, is it fool's gold, right? Like, does it look like Penny's made these changes? He has, but is he making these changes because his hands are tied, with guys injured, guys in foul trouble? We don't know what happened with Ashton Hardaway. Or is he actually, intentionally playing only 8 players more than 10 minutes because he knows that's the best thing to do? And I guess we'll find out more soon here.
Well, it was a coincidence, or it hasn't been coincidental that, first of all, everybody tried to blame Tomlin on some of the losses since he came to the team, which to me was a big coincidence. I also think this is a coincidence, but the last few games, Malco's played limited minutes. I think he had 17 maybe against Temple, was it? And then he got in foul trouble against Tulane.
7 against Tulane only, with 4 fouls, yeah.
Right, but how many minutes did he play against Temple? 17?
It was less than 20. It was around that.
Yeah. And they've won pretty much convincingly. Is that again coincidence?
No, it's not coincidence at all. The group they finished strong with against Wichita State, Malcolm was not on the floor.
Yeah.
Penny, I mean, we've been through all this a zillion times, I know, but it's beating a dead horse. But the Penny referenced certain lineups he can't play together. It's clear when Malcolm isn't in there with Jones and Quinterly on the floor, they play better as a group of 5. Penny changed it up a little bit, which he had to do based on the way they finished against Wichita State when they went up to Philadelphia. You're winning now. You stick with it. It just is what it is. On Saturday night, was it Friday night? Friday night, I went to a thing that the Memphis Showboats had, a fan thing over at Wiseacre. Mm-hmm. And among the people there was their new head coach, John DeFilippo, former NFL offensive coordinator, multiple teams. He was New Orleans Breakers head coach last season. And, obviously they had the merger with the USFL and the XFL. And I asked, and the New Orleans Breakers was one of the teams that did not make the merger cut. And then DeFilippo gets the Memphis job. And I asked him, when they had that whole period of uncertainty in the dispersal draft period, and teams were allowed to pick up players from teams that didn't survive the merger, I asked him if he had guys from the Breakers who were like lobbying him, hey coach, take me with you, take me up to Memphis, don't forget about me. And his answer was, yeah. He says, that's tough. He goes, but I learned a long time ago that you have to coach with your head, not with your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's something that Penny Hardaway grapples with. He does a lot of coaching with his heart. Sometimes that's a really good thing, and sometimes that costs you a little bit, and sometimes you just got to make the tough decisions and go what, the head tells you is the right thing to do.
No question about it. I think he'll continue to play that smaller lineup. It's not really small because you still have Tomlin and Jourdain, right. But they will face a couple of teams that have legitimate bigs. Florida Atlantic's got bigs, yep. And I think that's where Malco comes into play. And if Malco would wilter because of fouls or struggles with whatever, then Jordan Brown. I think that's the way he'll go with the bigs. But as far as this team getting ready for this 7-game stretch to end the regular season, the hardest stretch, certainly of the conference portion of their schedule, Quinterly, who's played really well the last couple of games, is going to have to step up and continue to do that. David Jones, once again, honored by the conference. He's certainly going to be in the conversation, if not win the player of the year in the conference, averaging 23 for the week again. He was consistent as heck, scoring 23 in both those games. Quinterly chips in, though, with 19 points in that win against Temple and did some really good things against Tulane. So now they have to be peaking. And it wouldn't hurt, Parth, if Jaquan Walton can find his shot, for goodness sakes, that gives him then 3 capable perimeter scorers to go along with Tomlin, who can score inside and out. That makes them that much more formidable as they get ready for this Texas two-step starting Thursday night against North Texas.
Yeah, he struggled again. 1 of 7 from the floor in both the Temple game in Philly and the Tulane game here in Memphis on Sunday. If he gets that shot back to where it was, that one Wichita State game, right, in January when he was on fire, when he went back to Kansas there, back to Wichita, Kansas, that could open things up as well. But it's good now that Jonathan Pierre, has emerged as a shot maker, as somebody who can do similar things on the perimeter and has the length to defend the way Penny wants to in that pressure defense. So that's good that they have somebody else that can do those things. But man, if Walton can turn that switch again, it would change things. But he struggled for most of the year. He's had flashes here and there, but largely he's been, not the Jaquan Walton he was at Wichita State.
You're right, Tim. They need that third guy, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I think Jaquan Walton is one of the ones who has struggled the most with the whole not being the guy issue.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think he thought more that he was going to be more of a go-to guy. David Jones took on that role. Walton took a back seat, and he doesn't seem to be comfortable with it. And then as we've talked about, Dandridge is the other one who's struggled with, I think at times not getting touches when he thought that they should pound it inside to him. I'm going to tell you what, they're going to need Malcolm Dandridge when they play those 2 games against FAU, because the big Russian kid, what is it, Golden?
Golden.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, he can get under your skin now. He did it in the game against South Florida, and I'm sorry, against South
UAB is the one you're thinking.
UAB, yeah. And he's a handful, so they're going to need Dandridge in that situation. We were playing a little game the other day. Which guy from another AAC team's roster who would be your first pick to put on Memphis's roster? And the guy from, help me out with names here, the UAB guy who had the 21 rebounds the other night was
Yaxel.
Yeah.
Lindenborg, yeah.
Yeah, him. His name came up, and my pick was the big Russian, because that kind of presence, especially in the tournament, makes a difference. And when you're talking about whether it's conference tournament or NCAA tournament or big regular season games at the end of the season, when you've got either your tournament resume or seeding in the conference tournament at stake, he's the kind of guy that can tip the balance, just because he has a knack for, like I said, being annoying in a good way.
I agree wholeheartedly. I always get in that discussion about teams really needing a big. Yes, they don't necessarily have to score the ball, but they have to do what you said, be the annoyance, get the rebounds, not allow offensive rebounds. Who's the guy from Parth? Who's the dude from South Florida?
What's his name? Kayshawn Pryor, right? The one who scored the go-ahead basket here in Memphis.
Was he the one who was like the annoying guy, or am I talking?
Yes.
Or am I UAB game? No, it's Pryor. It's Pryor.
The guy with the crazy hair, the
Yes.
was drawing all game. Yeah, that's Pryor.
Yeah,
Pryor.
because of the home game. I was there. I wasn't at UAB with the guys. So yeah, that guy's another one you want on your team. They do those kind of things, those intangibles. All right, let's move on. Let's get your thoughts here before we wrap it up on these 2 games. Sure. Absolutely pivotal. They're all pivotal. We know that. But you got a quad 2 opportunity in Denton Thursday night against North Texas, who's actually behind Memphis in the standings, sitting in 7th, Memphis sitting in 6th currently. And then Sunday, SMU looking for the revenge, looking to avenge that loss in Memphis. That is a quad 1 opportunity. There's not that many of them in the conference. Obviously, you got Florida Atlantic coming up. Parth, how do you see those 2 matchups for this week?
Yeah, it's going to be tough, forget matchups and forget styles, but just level of competition is going to be significantly increased North Texas, SMU, Charlotte, and FAU are all top 100 in both KenPom and the net. Memphis hasn't seen a top 100 team since SMU, right? Like that was back in early January, and before that it was Virginia. So
wow.
Yeah, exactly. So it's February 13th. Pretty much over the past 8 weeks, they've played 2 top 100 teams. So while they have gotten back on track with these, last 3 games, we're going to learn a lot about, how much work they still have to do or how much work they've done when they head to Denton and play North Texas and then play SMU days later. They've got some good opportunities here, though. 2 quad 1 chances in 4 games, quad 2 in Denton. That Charlotte game's not going to do much for you, but you got to avoid that quad 3 loss to obviously prevent further damage to your resume. So they've got some chances here coming up in the next 2 weeks alone. Tim,
how do you see the next 2?
Well, it's totally cliche, but it's the whole Jekyll and Hyde team. Which team shows up? If it's the 8-minute against Wichita State and the good in the first half against Tulane team, they should handily take care of business against North Texas and have a chance to kind of salvage their resume and really go into the home stretch feeling good about themselves. If it's that other one, forget about it. And you lose. If you lose the North Texas one, then you put yourself in position of having to win the conference tournament to get in, I would suspect. If you win at North Texas and you lose at SMU, now I think you've backed yourself into the corner of having to sweep FAU in order to be able to get an at-large bid. And then I think the other thing that we have to look at, because it got brought up earlier, but I don't think we broke it down enough, is how does one survive a Mardi Gras weekend in New Orleans?
I wish I could tell you how I did. I don't know. It's rough. That is a different. Tim, have you been to Mardi Gras?
Well, I've been to Lafayette Mardi Gras, which is kind of like baby Mardi Gras. I've never done full-fledged New Orleans at Mardi Gras time. Mardi Gras. It's
crazy. I'm glad I got to experience it. I would suggest everybody experience it one time in your life, and that is it. Cut it off after one. Cut it off after one. Last question for you, Parth, and I know a lot will depend on how the Tigers do with each passing game. But right now, if you're in Vegas, the 7 games they have remaining in the regular season, how many of them would the Tigers be an underdog in?
Yeah, obviously, we don't have the exact, Vegas odds yet. Right. Looking at KenPom, they are, underdogs at North Texas, at SMU, and then when they come back home, against FAU, the only game they're projected to win in these next 4 is the Charlotte one. And even that one's by I think 5 or 6 points. It's not by much. So, the computers still don't have much faith in Memphis, which makes sense, right? Like they're only 75th, I think, last time I checked in the net, 78th in KenPom. And that's a product of the damage they did even during that winning streak when they were eking by these really bad teams, man. So
well, they could be singing a different tune by the time we get to our podcast. Correct. We could be talking about a whole different story. Now there'll still be a lot to accomplish the rest of the way, but at least it gets them back probably on the good side of things, at least on a strong bubble, if not maybe into the field. It all depends, but a quad 2 and a quad 1 opportunity coming
biggest
up.
Week of the season right now.
Absolutely.
I mean,
no Parth doubt. Will have covered. Parth will be in Denton. Parth will be in Dallas. So make sure you keep it here to the Daily Memphian. Tim, you're not planning to go to Texas, are you?
Probably not until the conference tournament, but I can be persuaded.
Hey, there's a Bucky's.
Oh, I'm in.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you. Parth, safe travels. We'll talk to you 2 guys next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg.
All right, folks, make sure to check out our other podcasts here at the Daily Memphian, the Daily Memphian's food podcast. That's called Sound Bites. It's hosted by Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield. The Sidebar with Eric Barnes is about arts, culture, and everything in between. And the Grizzlies podcast, also hosted by Chris Harrington with Drew Hill. All of our podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. Again, a big shout out to our producer, Natalie Van Gundy. That'll do it for this week. We'll catch you next week, everyone.